We got a new story out of the Hill today. It's pretty blockbuster. Rod Rosenstein, the DOJ, exploring ways to more easily spy on journalists. Gee, I guess they're upset with some of Gregg Jarrett and John Solomon's coverage. John Solomon from the Hill, Gregg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst, author of the bestseller The Russia Hoax. So we've got that story on Rod Rosenstein. We got another Hill report. A former official says New York Times report shows FBI employees working outside of Department of Justice guidelines. This is not what their role is. But, excuse me, what do rules matter? And another article, an ex-FBI official says it's not the Bureau's role to probe foreign policy in the wake of Trump reports. And Gregg Jarrett has a blockbuster column that has now gone viral, an FBI report that is corrupt and dishonest. Welcome both of you to the program. Look, I've given my take the last hour. There's a lot of information here. But this really, to me, is everything we said and more, Greg. The biggest abuse of power, corruption scandal ever in American history. And the media, hook, line, and sinker, goes with phony reports.
It's one of the greatest dirty tricks perpetrated in modern American politics, an egregious abuse of power by top officials at the FBI to try to portray Donald Trump and investigate him for being a Russian agent. As I point out in my column, it's not only ludicrous on its face, but factually, they had no evidence. They had no reasonable suspicion. They had no probable cause. And in fact, at the time that Comey was fired, Andrew McCabe, who became his replacement as acting director, testified nobody had interfered in the Trump-Russia collusion investigation. That was followed by Rosenstein days later, who said nobody has interfered. Comey himself, days before he was fired, said nobody has sought to obstruct our investigation. And so what the FBI did was they were angry at Trump. They were angry that he had fired one of their own, James Comey, even though it was for just cause. And so they sought retribution, vengeance.
So go to James Baker's testimony, which became the source of all of this, where James Baker, again, another guy gone from the FBI, and James Baker saying they actually, after the firing of Comey, sat around and said, well, maybe Trump is in bed with Putin.
Right.
But we know, if we look at the timeline, that Lisa Page, James Comey, Peter Strzok, and McCabe all had said the opposite.
That's right. I mean, it's one thing to sit around in a room saying, gee, I wonder if he's a Russian agent. It's another thing to officially use your prerogative and powers as the chief law enforcement agency to launch a counterintelligence investigation of the president of the United States without a scintilla of evidence or justification for it. There's a statute, it's a felony. Deprivation of rights under color of law. It's abuse of power. It is also obstruction of justice. You're not allowed to use your position of power to misuse our system of justice. That's obstruction of justice. All of these people, when William Barr takes office as the Attorney General, all of the evidence of what these people did should be presented to federal prosecutors and, if appropriate, a grand jury, so that legal action, they should be held accountable for their conduct.
So far, John Solomon, none of that has happened. And by that, we can go back to the exoneration of Hillary in spite of overwhelming evidence of obstruction, overwhelming evidence she violated the Espionage Act, biased FBI agents that thought she should win $100 million to zero, then paying for the dossier, Russian information leaked to the American public before the election. And then, of course, the bulk of information, unverified, uncorroborated Russian lies used to get warrants to spy on a Trump campaign associate, which, again, nothing has happened.
Well, you have two. You're exactly right. There's a few people that have lost their jobs, but that's it, and no one has been brought to justice fully yet. And I think that will fall upon the new Attorney General, Bill Barr, when he gets confirmed. But I think Greg hit it on the head. What we saw this past week, and so we've chronicled for a year and a half, absolute proof that political bias, political opposition research was misused by the FBI to launch an investigation to try to undo undo a duly elected president. That's now been written in stone. It's factually supported. Gregg just did a great job of describing what the Bureau did when they fired James Comey. The Bureau acted like a jilted lover in a bad breakup, and it tried to lash out and strike out against President Trump, who's supposed to be their boss. They're treating him like a rival, and it's different when you're in a relationship and you post a selfie or something embarrassing of your ex-girlfriend or your ex-boyfriend. But here they were using the most awesome powers of the United States government, a counterintelligence investigation, to try to wound the president without a factual basis, without a predicate, without any evidence, and most importantly, don't take our words for it. Bob Mueller's former director of intelligence, when he was FBI director, a guy named Kevin Brock, one of the most respected FBI executives in the past, came on our show today and he said the following things. This was a rogue, biased, outside the bounds, outside the rules investigation. It makes me ashamed as a former FBI bureau man to see what they did during this period. They were acting like children. And I think that's an extraordinary indictment by someone who worked on the inside, who worked for Robert Mueller, who was the very first intelligence guy.
But they got this far.
They did.
And then what do you make then of the report on Friday in the New York Times?
Well, I think that the report on Friday is part of that retaliation, right? But first they were talking about maybe we'll wear a wire and take them out under the 25th Amendment. Then maybe we'll look at them for obstruction of justice. And where do they end up?
Well, maybe we'll wear a wire, too. That was part of it.
It is. It's all just retaliatory behavior without a factual predicate, without the evidence that the FBI is supposed to do. This is exactly how the FBI was supposed to be reformed after J. Edgar Hoover, so it wouldn't do these things when tempted, when emotional, when politics became more important than common sense. And yet a small group of FBI leaders allowed all these things to happen in violation of their own rules and in violation of the standards that every FBI agent who raises their hand and swears the oath vowed to uphold. And I think it's really shameful. The New York Times article is the ultimate example of that retaliation that Gregg was talking about.
You know, Gregg, I actually think Trump was facing a coup, is the line that Dowd, the president's former attorney, made on Brian Kilmeade's show, which I thought was interesting because at the end of the day, they have used every imaginable thing that they can to try and frame this president on Russia collusion charges that don't exist. But the media runs with everything as if it's fact, as if, if you believe the media, you would believe today that Donald Trump colluded with Putin.
Yeah, absolutely. In the epilogue of my book, I recount time and time again, by name, all the journalists who pronounced the president guilty of collusion without ever defining what that thing is, collusion. They thought if they simply asserted it, it was a word that would connote a crime even though it is no crime. There would have to be a conspiracy to commit another crime. Now, what is that? Is it conspiracy to defraud the government? No, there's no evidence of that. They have no factual basis to assert that. And yet, they've convicted the president in the court of public opinion. They do it every day. I watched this morning on CNN. My God, they all but pronounced Trump a Russian agent. They just assume it is true. And all it does is discredit themselves and undermine their credibility.
We'll take a quick break. More with Gregg Jarrett and John Solomon on the other side. All right, as we continue, Gregg Jarrett, John Solomon are with us. John, I want to get into this article that I don't think anyone's paying attention to because Rod Rosenstein swears he never wanted to wear a wire against Trump. He's been in charge of the Mueller investigation pretty much from the get-go because of the recusal of Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he's sworn that because we never got a chance to get him before Congress and really get an answer from him. And he has waffled on that issue.
About wearing a wire.
We don't know. We really don't know what part he played in those conversations. We know what Baker described, hearing from his FBI officials who attended the meeting, but we really don't know. And it was a shame at the end of the Republican-controlled House that they didn't get him before Congress and get testimony under oath that would really help.
The amazing thing is in the 9 months they were investigating Russia collusion after they exonerated Hillary, and by the same people that thought she should win 100 million to zero, they still didn't have, according to 4 people, any evidence. But then they had this meeting, according to James Baker. But Rosenstein, according to a report from the Hill where you work, him and the DOJ are exploring ways to more easily spy on journalists. Now, I would think that's you, that's Greg, that's Sarah, and probably me. I'm just guessing.
Well, that is my report, actually. That's my column. And I confirmed this over the weekend that there is a plan. Rod Rosenstein is considering leaving in the next few weeks, and as he's headed out the door, this may be one of his parting gifts. And it's a change to the long-standing rules that protected journalists from unnecessary subpoena, unnecessary search and seizure. I had my own personal run-in with Robert Mueller when he was FBI director. He took both my phone records and my mail without proper warrant or without proper procedure. They ultimately apologized. So I saw the FBI, when it had rules in place, the current rules in place, blow.
What case was that? What case was that involving?
That was back in 2002, in 2003, when I was working on Bob Torricelli, a senator who was under investigation for corruption, and then the early 9/11 failures of the FBI. And the FBI actually took a piece of my mail.
They did. They took it. This has happened to others. James Rosen, fellow Fox.
Rosen, both.
By the way, also Cheryl Atkinson over at, I guess she works now for Sinclair. She was working at CBS at the time.
That's right.
So this is not unprecedented. So,
it's not, but lowering that threshold would be unprecedented, and it would be very dangerous to the First Amendment and to reporters, because if you take away those prohibitions and those few procedures that are designed to protect people like you, me, and Greg, and Cheryl, and James, you now have given it a free-for-all. And what's interesting about Rod Rosenstein, and all of these conversations we just had, he was supposed to be the adult in the room, the last person to say, hey, stop, this isn't the right thing, fellas. We shouldn't open investigation without evidence. We shouldn't be talking about wearing a wire. We shouldn't be loosening the barriers for going down. I should have read that FISA warrant more closely before I signed it. And yet, time and again, he's sort of the enabler to a rogue FBI. And I think that one of his legacies, when we see all of this laid out in paper, when all of the evidence is finally put out there that validates everything Greg had in his book and what I've done in my columns, Rod Rosenstein will be that character who kept letting bad actors blow past the rules and the requirements, and I think that's going to be his legacy at the Justice Department.
I'd like to see, this is what people ask me. You pointed out for 18 months all these horrible crimes, and we've exposed, and again, not rank and file FBI, but the upper echelon,
right,
FBI, DOJ. Right. When are they ever held accountable? All right, we're going to let you guys go here. Thank you both for being with us.